What is up, Partner Up? We're back. Isaac, it's been a heck of a week. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm hanging in there. How are you doing? You're it's like, I don't know, one thing or the other. You're up in the middle of the night. You got people puking in the house. I don't know. It's always something crazy, man. This has been quite a stretch.
Yeah, it's when the going gets tough, the tough get going. What's that? A Dirty Harry quote? Gosh, I don't know. This was something my dad used to say. Yeah. But we're in the thick of it, and I'm excited to have yet another person speaking at PLX, because that's what, if you're listening to this, you have to be aware of the PLX Summit, plxsummit.com. The biggest event in partnerships history, and someone who's like in the thick of it, I would say, in terms of this transformation. For one of the reasons why we created the PLX Summit is that partnerships really is a strategy for every department, ecosystems, et cetera. So we got Allison Munro from Vena here on the podcast. Allison, welcome to PartnerUp.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Isaac.
Yes. I wanted to kick this off with your title, because it struck me from the very first time that I saw it, and it still struck me. And how you got that title wasn't like, oh, this is what you were hired for, right? The origin story of that in particular is a little bit different. And I think it might be instructive for where you're at today. You clearly have a belief that partnerships and ecosystems is a core part of like what the marketing engine should be, and, wider remits across the company, of course. But maybe specifically, you came into Vena. Tell us, what was the state of partnerships like? What were you doing, and how did that title end up becoming Chief Marketing and Ecosystem Officer?
Yeah, so you're right. I did sign up to be Chief Marketing Officer, and that originally in the first couple of years was to create value for our audiences, to engage our sellers and our revenue teams across channels that we owned and operated, and disseminated that value across those channels. I say that leading into the second part of the question. Because if you think about what it means to be a CMO and what it means to understand your audience, package value from across inside and outside your organization, to meet the needs of your audience wherever they are. And we know that's more fragmented and almost unreachable, the more the internet and the way buyers buy evolves. It almost seems like, or maybe it doesn't yet seem like, that transitioning from Chief Marketing Officer and adding ecosystem is actually a natural extension. Now, that's a 3-year journey that I summarized maybe in a few minutes off the top, so let's not take it for granted. But it is a lot of the same motion that marketing professionals are running when you think about, bringing in partners and value and the channels and the people that you work with in order to meet the needs of your customer wherever they are, when they are ready and when they're not ready to buy.
You, Allison, you said something interesting there. You said buyers are almost unreachable. Could you define that a little bit more as you see it, that problem?
I think there's a lot of conversation even in, partner forums or, marketing. There's no doubt that every channel is noisy. Everybody, I know on an average day, I get 25 prospecting emails on a daily basis. So, when I think about my social channel, the average inbound LinkedIn, and I've counted them to help emphasize that within my own organization, on average, I'll get anywhere between 5 and 10 inbound LinkedIn messages. I don't answer my phone. If I see a number that I don't know, it never gets answered. And I probably have 75 messages in my inbox. Now, it's not to say that I'm the state of the rest of the buying world, but we know that everybody is trying to reach the same people on the same channels with the same message at different levels of frequency. And let's not even consider the impact of ads and the number of ads you see or don't see and actually ignore on a regular basis. So when I say unreachable, it's not that we can't build audience segments and in some countries reach them in different ways based on regulation. But if you build those audiences and all chasing the same people on the same channel, it becomes noise. And then combine that with a distributed workforce that, I don't know about both of you, but if you open my calendar, I call it like calendar roulette. 3 months from now, you're probably going to find a stacked day of meetings. So you're always competing for attention, and increasingly so at every interaction. So when I say unreachable, it's the toughest job I think marketers and even revenue leaders and professionals have right now, which is to get to your buyer at the right time with an effective message in order to drive an action or behavior that stands out from, the 45 combined messages that have been solicited to your buyer on a day-to-day basis.
I have to hop in super quick, Isaac. Allison, why are you saying unreachable, but my other CMO friends aren't? Like that mindset that you just said, I'm not seeing that translate to the rest of the market. Like, why is this like some big insight that like somehow like marketers like, no, we still need to continue doing things the way we've always done things? Like, what was it about that made you think that way? And maybe like the colleagues aren't quite there yet. They just haven't experienced the pain, or?
I think it depends. If we can certainly follow a path to say these are the motions that we can drive to drive these KPIs. I can still show you a bunch of leads. I can show you a bunch of engaged accounts. I can show you the revenue that we have attribution to from a marketing perspective. Certainly. I think there is so much more opportunity for us to be more impactful, to do it faster, and to reach the right buyer with higher value, that I'm not accepting the status quo to say that, yes, this is our usual rhythm that we're all going to run. And I think we do that because that's what we can do and that's what we do. But I think to challenge yourself is to shake things up and be a little bit honest with yourself, to say that, based on the effort, and the motions that we've been running for the last 5 years, that we have to change because it's getting noisier and it's getting more competitive. And it's certainly, and I'm not talking competitive even on a competitive set or solution. I'm just, I think for 15 years, we've been talking about attention of a goldfish, and there's all these cute marketing stats we throw around about people's intention. But I think worse than that is it's just such a noisy environment. There's a certain level of exhaust of, flashing the same messages on the same channel and the same, BDR emails. And I love BDRs and working with them in partnership of orchestration. But if we just run the same motions to do the same things, there's going to be diminishing returns at a higher cost. And I think if we looked out to the market and asked a bunch of CMOs, the cost of demand is certainly going up. And there's always this debate between demand generation and demand capture. And are you justifying your existence by collecting a whole bunch of metrics, or are you able to do the things you need to do to reach your audience to drive impact? And we're all up against sort of that struggle on an ongoing basis. And I think we have to rethink, what's happening on a buyer's day to day, and not what we want to do or what we want to push or the KPIs we need to drive.
This is the PartnerUp episode, partner folks, that you send to your CMO, by the way. This is the one.
Yeah. It's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking about, Jared, I think this originally came up in our conversation with Mario Tarabia from Partner Page about, it's almost like you can inherit a job title or a job, and it's, okay, I'm a CMO or I'm a whatever the title is. And it kind of comes with a set of expectations, almost a playbook, KPIs. And you're, especially if you're new in the role, you immediately feel like, well, to succeed, I got to do all the things that this role is supposed to do. And you just start doing the activities, and you're not really thinking like a human. You're kind of thinking like a job title. This is what this job title does. But if you step back and think, what tactics do I not like when they're used on me? And if there's a tactic you don't like, I don't like getting, I ignore all of these emails. I ignore all the things I dislike getting. Why would I go and repeat those same tactics and just say that's my job, is to do all these very tactics to my potential customers that I don't like when people do to me? There's almost like this moment of stepping back and saying, hold on a second. The job title comes with all these assumptions because all of those are built from the past, and a lot of those are useful and going to carry forward. But if I just kind of like start from, do like a zero-based assessment for a second, what's the job to be done here? And what do I actually like? So how do I buy? How do I want to buy? How am I likely to make my next SaaS purchase? What's that process going to be like? And really start to like put yourself there and go through, like living in market, of course, but it starts with you. Cause like in most cases, if you're working in B2B SaaS, you're not that different from your buyers, on at least on a level of, hey, you have a process of discovering new products, and a process for going that you want to do that, and a process that you don't want to do it. You don't want to be shoved through a funnel and be served all these emails. So I just think it's really interesting. And a final thought on that is that this is maybe one of the benefits of the partnership space, is that there aren't as many playbooks already, which can be a struggle. But it's also a benefit because you haven't inherited all these things that are like, just run through the checklist. Right. This is what you're supposed to do. You kind of have to think more creatively and get in market a little bit.
I would just comment, Isaac, I think that's so true. When I, started at Vena, and I think with almost every leadership role that I've had, I'll share a story that I've shared before. When I first started, I was told, my KPI was 40,000 leads. And I gasped and said, we're doing $1 billion in ARR every year, like 40,000 leads. And then we did an analysis and we went all the way down. Okay, how does that cost, or how does that lead convert to opportunities? How does that convert to revenue? And what is the time frame? And I think it's very easy to celebrate $100 cost per lead. But if you have a 3 or 4x, program CAC on that spend, you're not actually driving the right motions. And so it can be very easy to come in and accept your KPI and then run all the motions to hit that KPI so everybody feels, that they're successful, versus flipping that on your head and saying, like, what is it we're actually trying to do? And what are the motions that we're going to run in order to achieve those results? And what are the assumptions we have to build in, because we can't measure it, but we can correlate spend or energy with results across the business. And I think whether that was early in my role as, a CMO at Vena, we were successful at achieving growth on a completely new model and did change from more of a lead gen to demand gen, and now moving forward to more of an account-based, go to market. And we can talk about that because it's not direct mail and it's not orchestrated experience. Like ABM is a whole other session, but driving that transformation, I think the same thing has happened in our organization and others. When you think about, what is partners and how does that fit in, and how do you, because you don't have those playbooks, there's a lot of question marks,
Right.
But it also gives you a chance to go, okay, let's work back from the end result. And the end result isn't, X% revenue from partners, right? It's really looking at what are the growth levers for not only our customers and what they need, the revenue certainly we can generate from, Partners Plus, and how we actually approach that as an integrated go-to-market to achieve the results we have and the business goals we have, not the marketing or not the partner or not the product, those individual siloed goals. It's really about bringing that together as a business. And I think that's where, the transformation for me was very natural to go from, chief marketing officer to chief ecosystem officer, which I know doesn't really necessarily exist. And folks ask me about it all the time. But it was also really important for us to state that this is a business priority for us. And we are committed to building, influencing, orchestrating, and growing our buyers' ecosystem, and how we are an active participant as a business, not as a department, in contributing to that. So there's a lot of disruption there, but I do agree that the playbook can be very dangerous if that's what you sign up for.
Right. It's interesting to think about this in terms of, like, Allison, if you were to imagine yourself sitting in front of, a dinner event for an evening with, let's say, 10 fellow CMOs, there's this journey that kind of moves from curiosity to perhaps courage and then conviction, right? Like, you're curious, okay, there's really not that much out there, but it is interesting. There isn't playbooks, but nothing's really working. This does work if you can pull it off. Then you have to have the courage to go take that leap and make that change and take that commitment. And then at some point you have conviction because you're all in. You're like, look, this is working and we need to scale this. I find that gap between curiosity and courage to be one of the hardest things to traverse in business, is because it's short-term versus long-term thinking. Short-term is like, wow, I'm not going to be able to do this quarter, right? This is like a long-term game. What would be your advice to those marketers sitting across the table and kind of ascending on that journey from, like, hey, the playbook's not written. We're all kind of curious about this, but curiosity doesn't fix it. It's courage.
I think a lot of that, first of all, has to do with the culture, in the organization. Like, how do you create space for kind of betting on your surefire wins and the things that are going to drive results, but also being able to communicate some bets or, some new things that you're going to try as a business and what those assumptions are. So that doesn't necessarily address how you go from curiosity to courage, but I think culture in an organization supports people showing up with, as we say on a day-to-day basis on my team, what did you do to make yourself uncomfortable today? Because when you're uncomfortable, you're growing. And if we're all sitting and we're comfortable, we're probably bored. We're probably operating against status quo. We're not taking any risks. And so we build that into our operating rhythm. I think from a planning perspective, to your point about short-term and long-term, there's always, and I think it's our responsibility, especially as CMOs, to be building for now, this quarter, marketing, next quarter, next year, and the next 3 years. And what are the bets we're making? And what are the experiments we're going to try, based on some level of rational thinking, and leaving room for experimentation. If you're not failing on, and I know that's so overstated in SaaS, but if you're not failing on a regular basis and you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing, and you're not trying, and you're not learning. And I think it's really A, you have to have the right culture, and B, you have to have a plan, that has a healthy balance of sort of surefire bets, optimization improvements, and shit we know nothing about.
I think that does speak a lot to the courage, though. Like, the current market conditions are a heck of a forcing function for the world writ large. But I think in particular, it's like, look, the median executive tenure, sales leader, marketing leader, whatever it is, that I've been paying attention to it for the past 10 years, only seems to have gone down, right? It hasn't gone up. So you have this like, well, wait a second. If the median tenure is 18 months, you have nothing to lose. Like, you really have nothing to lose. Like, what if you played the long-term game and went, hey, I have nothing to lose. I'm going to go all in on this because our surefire bets and operating, like, we can do that. That's comfortable. I just know it's not going to get me there. Like, if you do everything you know how to do, I think what you just summarized was perfect, Allison. If you do everything you know how to do right now and you look a year, 2, 3 years out, you will not be at the company goals, period. You just aren't. Because that's what everyone is going to do. So you have to get outside that comfort zone. I mean, that's one of my favorite phrases, is get comfortable being uncomfortable. What a sentiment. Isaac.
Yeah, I'm curious, Allison. This is something that I've just been wondering about. I actually haven't asked any other guests about this yet, but as the economy has gotten tighter, has it become easier to convince leadership at any of these companies that looking for plays that are not just about, hey, how will this immediately drive leads or revenue, but how will this prevent us losing customers? Because I see that with tech partnerships in particular, with integrations, oftentimes building that ecosystem is not so much a how will this drive revenue and new users play. It's more of a, hey, now we're a lot stickier. Now we're so interdependent. It's a lot harder for people to stop using this because it's tied to everything else. So, and when you're in like bull market growth mode, it's like nobody's really thinking about that. They're just like, what's going to get me the new users? But now when you're like, okay, how do we prevent ourselves from losing what we've already won at least? Has that changed the conversation and made it easier, or has it made it harder to kind of argue for a longer term ecosystem strategy?
That's a good question. I think, yes, there's economic downturn ahead of us, but let's also note that we faced similar or different conditions coming out of the pandemic. So I think for us as a business, we've made bold or courageous decisions that when other people were pulling back on investment, we were going all in. Maybe when some organizations are looking at short-term gains and it's Q4, what activity can you do now to fill the pipeline? We have to close revenue, et cetera, et cetera. For us as a leadership team and, with a wonderful CEO, Hunter Maidley, we've been able to keep our eye always on the short and long term. But again, it doesn't mean it's easy because you're always up against those conversations, because we still have those conversations of, what are you going to do to drive impact this quarter? What are you going to do for next quarter? And I'm like, hold on a minute. Marketing is not responsible for this quarter. And I, posted quite a lot about that. We're responsible for next quarter, because if you pull me back to focus in this quarter, the pain is going to continue to run into the next quarter. And then how do we keep an eye on not only, again, the next 6 months, the next year, and the next 3 years? And I think we did that at the beginning of the pandemic with community. Well, everyone was focusing on maybe pulling back and pausing. We were like, no, we're going all in on community. We're going to launch this virtual, conference. We were the first in market. It was March 14th. We went into lockdown. May 15th, we undid our in-person conference and we had 7,000 people online registered, and then online to engage in a format that nobody had ever done before. We've since developed, a learning academy. We've launched our forums. So, when I think of ecosystem and building that out, a big part of that was, we've always sort of been committed to in the right balance of, again, short-term and long-term goals. However, it is difficult now to kind of temper the ecosystem conversation, because now we've done a lot of education internally, like what is an ecosystem? What does it mean? But it's also now not the silver bullet that's going to solve everybody else's, concerns, or that's going to get us to 158%, performance next year. So it's like, yes, we still need to invest in this. And we're even going through this in planning now. How can we demonstrate and actually plan for impact, and what level of impact over what period? And that might be bigger in FY25. So having that conversation is as tough as, getting people excited, because now you have to temper back and put in a realistic framework for, again, what's driving in this quarter, next year, first half, second half, and what is going to fuel, our growth in FY25. Fortunately, we have an organization and a leadership team that can have those conversations. And again, that's why I go back to culture, because I've been in many organizations where all they want to know is what I'm going to do right now. And that's tough.
You mentioned that you've done a lot of internal discussion and education on what is an ecosystem. How do you define it there? How do you guys think about that word? That's a question that we've asked a lot. I'm really curious how you define it.
Yeah, I'd have to say, I think part of the easy definition, comes from the community and the conversations that you have asked. But the way our organization now talks about it is all the people, process, products, technology, and influencers that our ideal customer profile is engaging with. It's not, just our community or our owned and operated channels and our third-party channels. It's not, somebody's cloud ecosystem or particular destination. And I think that was the biggest change, that it was actually bigger than any one person had seen. It's not our partner ecosystem. It's not our cloud providers ecosystem. It's actually our buyers ecosystem. And when I go back to buyers being unreachable, how do we show up in every single one of those channels with the greatest value, with a better together story that feeds our customer or a prospective customer, not what we want to accomplish and not who we think we compete against and not the KPIs we want to drive. And I think that was the biggest shift in our thinking and has actually lit up our team and a bunch of minds of how everyone can participate. It's not a partner function. It's not even a marketing function. Everybody can contribute to our buyers ecosystem in an impactful way.
Ecosystems are eating everything, and it's something for everyone. What I'm curious about is I spent a lot of time trying to define what an ecosystem is. Following on to that, Allison, is I define ecosystem as communities that have a shared communities which are comprised of individuals which have a shared professional interest, and then accounts which are partners that have a shared commercial interest. And those two things are tied together by media, aka content, right? Shared, events, content, thoughts, lexicon, words, language, right? Do you view that as part of it as well, like the community side, the partner side? Ecosystem is a very intentional word. It's basically the things outside your walls. It's not just channel, it's a dedicated line of business, it's channel partner. It's not just partnerships, it's everything outside of your company.
We do. We absolutely do. And I think that's, again, where I think we're saying the same thing, only differently. And I'm probably being a little more ambiguous based on the conversations where you're talking to people, hundreds of people in the organization that understand different parts of that ecosystem. I agree. I think community is a big part. We've done a really good job and had a really big commitment of building our own community for finance and operations professionals. We've also gone out and intersected with our, strategic partners or keystone system communities or other media organizations that, or influencers or third-party communities that support finance and operations professionals. And the reality is it can't always be Vena or a Vena sales rep or a Vena marketer that shows up to engage with those messages or provide that social proof. So, how we develop programs that, again, build out our ecosystem and also, I don't want to say bleed in. I'm sure there's a better fish underwater example that you can use, but that start to penetrate, the third party and adjacent ecosystems is really what we're looking at, and how we bring, our product IP and how we bring value, like templates, Excel templates. I'm wearing my Excel Nerds t-shirt. Like a core to our product, right, is the ability to work within Excel. So how have we now developed templates that we're able, best practice templates that we're able to disseminate across our own channels, that our partners can co-create and develop, that they can disseminate across their channels, that they can provide to their customers and our shared customers and future customers for free, to start to, develop a value exchange without sort of any sightline necessarily of our product initially. We have people on social media, we have media organizations, we have influencers developing these templates and leveraging these templates. So absolutely, when I think of, a marketing motion, that is something we're already doing. And again, going back to value creation and distribution, if that's what marketing does, how do we do that in our own ecosystem and in other ecosystems? That's one example. But it absolutely is a shared, definition. And again, why I think it's so important that marketing is a big part of leading that conversation.
So you said influencers are creating these templates is what, because I was thinking, okay, so you have all these templates you make, and then you go to influencers and say, hey, here's some useful tools. Why don't you go share this? But you actually said creating. That's really interesting to have give me an example of how that works, where an influencer is actually part of the process of creating this thing instead of just, all right, here you go. You're somebody that should go and broadcast this for us, right? Get this out to your network for us, but actually having them be a part of that. That's interesting. I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, we have a technology partnership with Microsoft. So part of our core of our product is a universal language people understand, which is a competitive edge, is Excel. And then also Power BI. So there are tons of fans and aficionados and even Microsoft MVPs that are out there teaching, educating, and building on, familiar tools and applications and interfaces like Excel or Power BI. So the way we work with influencers is, again, not to go promote this, but to actually get them in sort of their experience and best practice is to build their Excel templates, is to build their how-to videos, not only in templates, but they contribute to our our learning academy, Vena Academy. They contribute to our forums, and they're bringing their almost, I want to say, dare I say, their intellectual property or their expertise to our product in the same way that our partners are starting to do that. Like, we have our own templates where we have best practice by industry, use case, and a whole bunch of other things that we have a collection of, but we actually have partners that have deeper expertise in particular areas. We have influencers that have really deep expertise in particular areas. And so bring those sort of 3 areas of expertise together to co-create within our community and disseminate that for free. There's nothing to lose. And, talk about better together, talk about extending reach and distribution. There's a lot of power in being able to do that. And it's authentic. We're not spoon feeding someone to go off and promote. They get to promote what they create. Same way with our partners. They get to co-innovate in our platform and share a piece of IP that demonstrates their expertise in market, and they get to give it away for free through our channels and their own. Like, I can't think of a better ecosystem marketing play, that allows us to really develop our expertise and reach our audience, again, in the unreachable way, by leading with value that we've co-created on channels that we own and co-own and borrow and share.
This is the conversation I've been wanting to have in marketing for such a long time. Like, you would have slotted it really nicely with Isaac and me and how we thought about building everything out as a media company. It's like we're speaking the same language, but it's I just have to commend you on that, Allison, like how you're thinking about bridging that gap and sort of, I don't want to use the phrase crossing the chasm, but making that transformation to go, okay, a template strategy, right? Like, okay, we want to create and own the templates, like, versus no, let's invert that and go with an influencer strategy. When I was at PandaDoc, that was a big part of how we grew, became, a unicorn company, was we couldn't rank for e-signature, right? We couldn't rank for these high, like, we had big dogs that were kicking our butts everywhere. So it's like, well, maybe we could rank for the things that people use eSign for. So it was like sales proposal template, marketing agency proposal template, these other things. And the thing that always angered me was, I was like, these templates suck, right? They were built by someone that clearly wasn't an expert, right? Like, they had no influence. Like, you know what? I want the sales proposal template that person used to close $1 million deal, right? Like, and then now that I think about it, like, the proposals that I've put together to close 7 and 8 figure alliances, I'm like, gosh, like, those are awesome. These are really, really good. But it's like, I had to really dive deep and go, it's like, man, I could go out there and give that stuff away. Wow. That's what happens, tying together the first part of this conversation to this one. Whenever you go from curiosity to courage, there is no playbook, and you come up with something innovative. Why is it that only founders are allowed to be innovative in SaaS? It's like, oh no, they came up with this great idea. It's like, that's exactly what it means to be a great executive today, is kind of that transformation that you went on. And like, that's a phenomenal strategy. That's what needs to be happening in marketing combos today.
You mentioned that it's authentic too when it comes from those influencers. And I think it's almost like the stronger and more rabid your ecosystem, or at least the diehard fans, the more that matters. Now, I don't know a ton about the Excel world, but I know enough to know that there are entire Twitter accounts that only make Excel jokes that you only get if you're like an Excel nerd. There was an Excel tournament that was on like ESPN3 or something, right? There's this whole subculture. So if you're some person who's, okay, from our company, we're going to make all these tools and templates and give them, and you're not like somebody who's really living in they're going to know that you don't have the trust. They're going to be able to sniff it out. They're a diehard audience, right? So you need to work with those people so they can be real. Be like, hey, you build what's valuable to you. I just think that's really cool.
Well, and to your point, part of our value proposition is we are the only, native Excel complete planning platform. And if you're a CFO, and I've been in many meetings with CFOs even before Vena, where the first 10 minutes of the board meeting is all about the magic in the model that the CFO manages on their single spreadsheet, right? So through our product, we enable collaboration, but all of the benefits of, an FP&A and complete planning platform, but the interface is Excel. And to your point, there is a subculture, again, my t-shirt says Excel nerds. There is a subculture around Excel, and getting those folks to contribute to, our marketing campaigns is key. But also, Jared, to your point, there are many companies I can point to today that are destinations for professional best practice. You go, you download the template, whether it's an Excel sheet or what have you, there's a column to the left and a column to the right, and they say, here you go. What we did was we took our best practice templates, right? Like the best workforce planning, the best budgeting and forecasting. We've just launched the marketing, performance management, budgeting and planning template. Now that wasn't easy because like working with partners, there's a conversation and a culture change inside. You have to be able to say, it doesn't matter if our competitors get this thing. We're focused on our audience. We're here to provide value to the market. Our competitors are going to get behind our gates and our forums and our videos. We just have to accept that. And so I think sometimes, you can be courageous, but you also have to be persistent. And you can't expect people to get it in your organization. You have to, again, lead with empathy to understand their concerns, but show them the business value and the opportunity, and then go at it together with some assumptions. Understand the risk and what people's feelings are about making new moves, but demonstrate the upside. We put a bet on the board. We launched our template marketplace in May. We put a bet on the board. We're at 248% of that bet. So guess what? The organization is very interested in this play and thinking about how we now even bring that from a product-led growth perspective into our product, in the future. And again, that's a long-term play or strategy that was initiated by, a fun bet or idea. And to some people, what might have seemed like a risk, for us in order to build out our community and create greater value. And to your point, Jared, show up for what people need. Product-led growth is so funny, right? It's like, let's get a free version. Well, I think of product-led growth as, social proof over marketing claims. I can tell you anything you want. My point is you need to be able to see, experience, and feel. And so this was part of that. It was a light lift. It was a collaboration between marketing and our, sales solutions consultant and services team. And let's clean up these templates so they no proprietary information, anonymize them, make them best practice, and send them out into the world so everyone can benefit from them. And guess what the market is saying? Yes, we need these. We want these. And in fact, we want more because on average, one person is downloading 5 templates. Well, let's get another 100 or 1,000 templates out and let's see how many templates are being consumed and how people are starting to use them in their day-to-day business as they build affinity and trust with Vena.
That line you said, PLG is social proof over marketing claims. That's a banger right there. That's a good one. I love that. Such a great summary. I was thinking as you were talking that in a market with a highly educated buyer and buyers that talk to each other and have communities, it's being willing to do things, even though your competitors may be able to see it. It may give them advantage and you're not hiding it all. It signals to those educated buyers. They like that because that signals confidence, right? It's like if you're talking to somebody who's got a startup that doesn't have a website yet and they say, I can't tell you about it unless you sign an NDA. That's not actually a good signal. But if they're like, yeah, here, I'll tell you exactly what we're going to do because I'm so confident that it's going to be really hard to compete with us. That's actually a good signal, right? So when you're more open, it feels scary because you're thinking so much about your competitors, but think about your customers as well. They see that and they know, they love the companies that are open and unafraid, right? And they'll reward you for that, especially if they're a highly educated buyer. I think that's really, man, you have such a great way, Allison, of like really compactly, that sentence, PLG is social proof over marketing claims. You just have a really good economy of words when you describe these things. I love it. I'm just like taking a class over here.
Thanks, Isaac. That means a lot coming from both of you in this forum. You guys do this so well.
I've been slacking Isaac back and forth about a number of things that you've said because what I find is such a hard thing right now is like establishing the language that should be utilized inside of each department. So like for sales or for success or for product, it's not just co-marketing, to your point, something basic. It's this specific thing to Vena that's about you, like, so like templates in this community, and it's very purposeful and intentful. And it just basically what I'm recognizing here, it's like the difference between being a committed executive that's there to actually co-innovate with your company versus someone that's like, I'm just a marketer, right? Like you took on a challenge and you've stepped up to the challenge, and it doesn't mean you're going to be the best person that's ever done it. But like, I don't know. I think you actually set a really good role model example for other marketers or leaders or even partner pros, regardless out there, to come into this with some conviction and to take that courage and take that risk. And look what comes out the other side. So this is a 3-year journey that you've been on. I think you're a lot farther on that journey than you might think. Right? Just by virtue of you being able to articulate it that clearly and cleanly. Like this is clearly taking up ELT management time, right? This is clearly taking up time with your team. I'm going to be speaking with some of your team here in a little bit. I don't know about what, because you've got some stuff on point. What would you say, like, what's the thing that, to unpack that one layer further, what was some of the things that you've been able to pick up from working in ecosystems or partnerships that kind of got you to this point where you could show up to a conversation like this and be so articulate, a great economy of words? Is that the marketing experience writ large? Is it working in an organization where you feel like you are an empowered executive to create change? Like what leads up to this point where you can jump into a conversation like this and clearly have a command of, your message?
Well, I appreciate the compliments and I'm humbled. I think that's your perception that I'm going to digest to say that, because, do I always feel confident showing up and, talking about these things? Sometimes I feel like I'm speaking a different language to a lot of people.
Right.
I've spent a lot of my time throughout my career, ditching the acronyms is always infuriating to me because you would never say that to a CFO. And I actually, because we're in the CFO business, I counted their acronyms versus ours, and they have way more, right? And if you think of marketing or go to market as an art and a science, there is going to be a lexicon or language that we need to understand, and share with each other. I think regardless throughout my career, I don't by any means think I'm an ecosystem pro. I think for 20 years, whether it was in B2C, whether it was in the early days of starting my own agency, around music events and audiences, ultimately all you're trying to do, is to connect audiences with messages that resonate against the needs they have, and constantly innovating on how you do that as the market changes, as technology changes, as the way people buy changes. And I know we talk about that so much, but I don't think people really understand, the dramatic transformation that we're undergoing even in the last couple of years on how to reach your buyer. And, for me, that's just core to what I live and breathe as somebody who likes to connect buyers or audiences, not even buyers, because I used to do this for music, like audiences and value. And how do I do that in the most impactful way and shift from my objective as Vena CMO, which I think is the biggest shift all professionals have to make, and what does my buyer need? So many people talk about that, customer centricity. If you talk to any random, I think, marketing or sales professional, go, what are your objectives this month? They're all going to start with, I need to, we want to, this is what I have to do.
That was a much more articulate response to my inarticulate question. Like you hit the nail on the head. I think having this command of the language and being intentional where it's like, look, I'm using these words. I don't understand what they mean. I need to go one layer down to that first principle. And speaking from these more foundational points is just, it's so phenomenal. I'm refreshed. I've been having some harder marketing conversations lately. And even if you're like, hey, we're still on a long-term journey, I think my point is you can show up to a conversation like this and have command of a room and a message where it's like, look, this is the journey that we're on because of, we started this conversation with, let's say these unreachable people, right? Like there is a market shift that's happening in the world. We're on a transformation. There isn't a playbook we got to start using the right language so we can speak to one another. I mean, you just took us on a journey on how to kind of go about this, right? So I said this was the conversation, if you're in partnerships, to send to your CMO. Allison, you did not let us down at all whatsoever. I'm really excited for our next conversation and have you at the PLX Summit. I think, mark my words, a year from now, that'll be one of the biggest watering holes in B2B go-to-market, is the convergence between partnerships and marketing.
I'm making the same bet.
Absolutely. We're happy to make it with you. Isaac, any plugs or anything else to take us home?
No, I don't think so. Get to PLX. By the way, if you you can go pick up right after you sign up, we have a physical workbook for the PLX Summit. So it's got information on every session. It's got, I'm getting not even in front of the camera, but it has QR codes for every speaker's LinkedIn. It's got notes on the session. So a really fun way to like have a physical artifact to go along with this event and give you something to take notes on. So when you register, you'll have instructions on getting that as well. So really excited.
Allison, this was a pleasure of a conversation. Look forward to developing a lot more content with you and the team around the convergence of partner marketing and ecosystems. And PartnerUp, we will see you all next time.